Hey there, everyone. My name is Miguel Castaneda, a freshly certified registered dietitian. I'm a recent graduate from the University of Alabama, and I'm here to talk to you a little bit about tips on passing the RD exam. Now, you don't need me to tell you that we are in some certainly unprecedented times, but since everything is so new, as someone who's just recently taken it, I wanted to give you a little insight on what I did to pass. And this is by no means a foolproof guide, but just a couple tips and tricks I hope will help you, especially in our current state. And there should be a little handout attached to this speech with some resources that I use to study. So let's begin. The first thing I would do is, if you can, go ahead and schedule that exam. There's quite a few benefits I found to scheduling as soon as possible. So first off, it's hard to actually know how to start studying if you don't know when your exam is. The deadline also gives you a little bit of motivation, and it makes the exam feel like tangible. And early on, there was some backlog with the exams because of COVID. So finding availability in your area can actually be kind of difficult unless you make that reservation ahead of time. So play it safe, reserve a testing center as soon as possible, and try to find a certified Pearson testing site if you can. So during the height of the chaos, I had some of the testing sites cancel on me that were secondary, pushing my exam further out. So now that you know when your exam is, it's time to prepare. Go ahead and make a study schedule. Be generous with your schedule so you can keep your life flexible with the uncertainty of our times, but go ahead and dedicate some time every single day to working on your exam preparation in one form or another. And that leads you to the nitty gritty of it, which is actually studying. So you're looking at that pile of study guides and wondering, how do you actually do this? The question I would ask myself is, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. So studying a little bit every day goes way farther than a last second cram. And trust me, I am a notorious procrastinator, but I can guarantee you that is not the way to take this exam. I started studying weeks earlier than any other test I had in my life, and I was still so anxious the morning of I couldn't keep breakfast down. But all of that stress can be diminished with some simple preparations. First, you have to figure out what you don't know. We spent a lot of time in rotations and in class learning, but how much of that did you actually retain? Is that content fresh in your mind, or still do you need to go back and review some of those vitamins from 101? To figure out my knowledge base, I spent a lot of my early studying just reading and rereading and rereading again. Basically, I read Gene Inman, or whatever study material you're using, from cover to cover at least 5 times, if not more. On the first go around, I read only, no notes. I was reading to understand the grand scope and to familiarize myself with what I had no frame of reference on, which was unfortunate because I would read entire chunks and have no clue, but that's okay. It's a process. So on the second go around, I went and took deliberate notes on sections that I still had no idea about with the intention to understand basics. Once I built my foundation on those two go arounds, I went through one more time and annotating the whole thing, and I was taking a magnifying glass to the text in order to understand minor concepts and connect them with the overarching themes. So after a couple passes at the text, I could take a look at a page and give a general summary on it. So once you've read as much as you can stomach, it's time to reinforce that knowledge and start studying. I picked up quite a few techniques in my time, and here are some of the best ways I found to actually retain that information. So first off is flashcards. You can make your own, buy some online, find a physical copy, but I personally use some handmade ones, some ones I found on Quizlet, and a set called RDN a Flash. These cards are a really easy way to keep yourself busy and are really good for firing those synapses when you're on the go. You can recruit someone to help test, or if you're by yourself, you can answer the flashcard out loud to actually discern whether or not you know the answer or if you just memorize the card. And try to elaborate on those terms so you can understand the whole grand scheme attached to them. Now, this brings me to my next strategy, which is recall. Take an overarching topic that you'd like to focus on and write down everything you know about it in a minute. That memory retrieval is one of the strongest ways to solidify that information in your brain. It shows you what you actually know and where your gaps are. So, and then next, you can try explaining a really tough concept to a friend and actually try to teach them how it works. Once you can describe that in that manner, you know you've got it down for sure. And don't be afraid to use online resources. If something isn't clicking, Google a lesson on it. Find a mnemonic to help you memorize all of those essential amino acids or make your own to remember that laundry list of government programs. Once you feel like you have a solid grasp so far, test yourself. Practice exams are your best friends. Find and take as many as you can, and I've actually seen a lot of people say that they've seen a repeat question or two or on their actual exam, so who knows, maybe you'll get lucky. But when you take those practice exams, find the questions that you've guessed on or hesitated or the ones you got completely wrong and go back into your notes and figure out why. Try to relearn that concept until you can understand the question and answer it without hesitation. And then next you're going to want to start trying to actually understand the reasoning behind the questions. Read beyond the surface level and try to understand what are they trying to actually ask. The end of Inman actually gives you a little guide on how to read subjective questions and recognize the order of priorities that the exam wants you to know. So, overall, this process is not about memorizing, it is not about cramming. I spent a long time in college doing just that, and I walked away with a lesson seller memory bank. But it was only when I learned in a practical sense that I felt like I could truly conquer this exam. So, and depending on availability, don't be afraid to reschedule your exam if you don't feel ready. And listen, it's a tough exam, truly. So don't be discouraged if you don't pass. Breathe, recognize where you struggled, and prep for the next round. You've come way too far to give up now. And so there are countless ways for studying for this exam. And if my take isn't for you, that's okay. There's an endless bevy of resources online, fellow dietitians, interns, CP students who are eager to help. So, on the day before your exam, don't worry too much about studying. If you've prepared properly, you already know what you need to. Drink lots of water, eat a nutritious meal, get a good night's sleep, and take a deep breath. I know there is a lot of uncertainty in the world we live in right now, but there's one thing that I know for certain, and it's that you've got this. Stay safe, wear a mask, and good luck.